So we're now recording. And there was something about courageous coaching which has really sparked interest, I think, with people. So I guess we should start with what courageous coaching means to each of us. And I think I had a realization for me what it means to me when I was very recently. So I've now got my MCC, so I think I should be beyond these thoughts, but I think that's the realization that we are never beyond learning. We are at work in progress always. I was coaching a client, giving some feedback on a 360, and the 360 kept coming out with comments about how defensive this person was. And so I was doing the usual coach process about, when you read that about yourself, what does that spark? This person was kind of, well, I just can't work out why people think I'm defensive. I mean, just, I'm just, and he became increasingly defensive to me as the conversation progressed. And I remember sitting there thinking, do you know what? This is fascinating. I can't wait to take this to supervision. This person who is getting feedback on being defensive and is appearing defensive on hearing the feedback. I really can't wait to meet my supervisor and talk about it. And then the penny dropped that I was a coach and I was in the opportunity to actually say it within the session. The other realization as a supervisor that what would I say would be, and what did you tell the client? What did you say? So I had to, pull up my coach pants and be courageous and say, that's, fascinating to hear this, because I'm almost hearing it. It sounds like you're being defensive to me as we talk about this. That's how I'm hearing it, how it's landing, and actually name it within the session rather than go, conclude. Actually, it was the difference between collusion and naming something. And there was a lot of learning in that. And the client took it away and really processed it and thought about what that might mean and the impact that he might have. My very quick story has taken more time than I thought. Sharon, you had something that you were going to share about very early on in your career.
Yes, and I will, and I think it would be good just to maybe ask people who are on to pop in the chat if they can, what it means to them. It would be great to see that.
Yeah, to use the chat or to sit and think. People listening, I know some people may be listening afterwards to the podcast or watching the video. Just a moment about what is courageous coaching to you?
So my experience was quite early on in my coaching career, probably about year 1 or year 2, when I was really a rookie out in the world, and got a fairly big deal. When I say I went in as a third part with someone else, a third party, but as a coach. And I was coaching the client that I had. After about 2 or 3 sessions, I felt like I was making no headway at all. And he always told me at each of the sessions how many coaches he'd had when it came to me. And I was quite new in all of this. And all of a sudden I thought, I really don't want to coach this person, because I don't think this person wants to be coached. I think this person would rather just go through coaches and have a story about going through coaches. And I remember the feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I mean, like right there in the pit of my stomach, with what is it that you have to do, because you have to end this. And in the 3rd session, I said, I don't believe that I'm the coach for you. And I think we must end this coaching right now. And he was quite horrified, but it took me a huge amount of courage, because the story that I was telling myself was that I'd be history as a coach. How would you ever end everything I'd learned? It was all about the client. The coach really didn't come into it at all. And it was the best thing that I could have done. agonized and mortified for weeks over whether I should have, whether I shouldn't have. Went through the whole self-story thing, but what I took away from it was I knew where my courageous coaching voice lived. And I knew that I could call on it again. So ending an assignment when you're quite new in the coaching field could be seen as reckless. I believe it was courageous to do that. And it was for me the start of being able to be courageous when I coach, when I have to name things. Yeah. I know what part of my body to call on.
Karen, I know you've got some real wisdom about accessing the intelligence within your body.
Thanks, Mary Anna. And what I'm wondering is just building on from what Sharon was asking and the inquiry we're in, whether there's anything that people are sharing and whether there's anything that you'd like to bring into the room, Mary Anna, before I share.
There is. So we've got some comments about vulnerability, being comfortable with emotion and difficult topics. And I think the emotion piece speaks to something that I remember after my mum died, that I felt that very hard. And now I just say I'm someone that, you know, I'm better at dealing with that. Actually, I'm even tearing up thinking about it. Courageous coaching, putting aside my people-pleasing tendencies and need to be liked, being brave enough to ask something that a coachee might find very challenging and scowl at me. The courage to name, mirror, and take the risk of challenging my clients' thinking and perspective.
Beautiful. Lovely. And I share those views very much so. So, you know, Mary Anna, you spoke about being an MCC coach, and I am too. And the thing is that the learning journey never ends, which is I find marveling and wonderful. So my story is more recent, where I was invited by another coach to work with someone who is going through quite a big transitional life change. Anyway, and she and I had a chemistry session, and it was a wonderful chemistry session where we really focused on who she wants to become. And then the next conversation, we started talking about where she wanted to focus. And what landed up happening, which was an absolute pattern of what she wanted for the coaching, is that she landed up talking all about kind of what she wanted in terms of doing. And anyway, and I got completely swept up in it. And I said, you know, by the end of it, I said, you know, well, we haven't really come out with clear outcomes, but how about next time we do X exercise and Y exercise? And and she was like, yeah, sure. Anyway, and I got off the Zoom call, and I just, like, in my body, intuitively, I just thought that was really crap. Not her, me. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I actually sat with it, and really with all the work that I've done with embodiment, because that is a deep passion of mine. And I think so much of the time we ignore the role of the body. I just sort of sat with it, and I realized that I was not being in service of her, actually. So before our next session, I sent her a mail, and effectively I said to her, I said, look, it's really up to you, but I'm wondering if we might do a do-over in terms of starting our coaching. And I said, and this is all about me wanting to support you, and it's all about how I was being as a coach, and really is not about who you were as a client. And she sent me a lovely mail back, and she said, you know, she said, and I also made it clear that we would add a session on. So there was no cost for the previous session, because I think from an ethical point of view, that was important. And she sent me a message back and she said, Karen, I think that kind of time would be time very well spent. And so we had a conversation last week, and it was all about who she is being and who she is becoming. And we spoke about the contracting, the rubbish contracting that I had engaged in, and cleared a space for that. And for me, that's about being able to say, it doesn't matter where we are in our journey. It's about what's our way of being as a coach. How do we come into the room, and can we keep looking at ourselves and observing, including with, as you were speaking about, Mary Anna, in supervision. We don't always need supervision. Sometimes we can do that for ourselves and then face into that.
There's something coming up for me hearing you speak about ego, and that, you know, that recognition that we are always learning, that it's continual. We have to continually keep at ourselves about this inner voice or the inner wisdom, and just tune into it. It doesn't suddenly, because we've got a particular qualification or we've done our training or we've done this course or that course, it doesn't suddenly stop.
No.
It sometimes means that the signals are more apparent, actually. But we need to really do something to continually tune into that. I'm just going back to
so I wonder if I could comment on one of our audience who spoke about being comfortable with vulnerability. And of course, we know that Brené Brown has made vulnerability a really big word. And, you know, I would say that I don't think we ever become comfortable with vulnerability. But what we can do is we can increase our capacity for discomfort. I think we can do that because our comfort zone is the one we step back into all the time. So there's somewhere between my courage and my comfort zone. And it's that space of, how do I build capacity to be uncomfortable myself? How do I build capacity to name what I'm seeing? And in that, there has to be a role for self-reflection. Karen's been very clear about how self-reflection led her down the path that she went. If she'd just moved on, none of that might have happened. So what does it say about us as coaches and the role that self-reflection must play? Because maybe today I don't say it, but maybe between now and the next session, I build the capacity to say it.
Yeah. I'm tapping back into see some more comments about liking the idea of recognizing where courage lives in your body, and reflecting what I said about colluding with clients. I think we can also collude with ourselves. And I think that taps into what you were just saying, Sharon, about comfort. It's easier to go along and go with your clients instead of say, oh, isn't it terrible that everyone thinks you're defensive and you're so clearly not. We have, you know, it's easier, but what is our job? What would a coach do? You know, that's what would a coach do here? I remember thinking that when I was mentoring coaches, when I mentor coaches about the coach knowledge assessment, you know, and I tell them, just sit there, look at the questions, just in your head, think, what would a coach do? What's different about my role here than mentoring or consulting or counseling? What would a coach do? And that is sometimes naming it, being brave, pulling up your coach pants and getting on with it. And we have another question to address here, which was, how do you know when you're coaching courageously?
I'll start with that, if that's okay. I think this is where the role of the body becomes so crucial, and what's happening in my own body, and also what am I noticing with my client in terms of what might be going on in their body. So some learning that I did many years ago came from Arnold Mandel. And essentially, if you think about it, coaching is about transformation and change. And as Sharon, as you were saying, you know, in fact, our body is geared towards, our nervous system is geared towards homeostasis. So the familiar and the known. And this model is about change and transformation. And how do you know that's happening? And for me, it's about signals. So it's for example, if the client says something and I'm not naming what would be useful to name, it actually shows up in my body. So my breathing might increase, or my muscle tension, I might start to tighten up. Or I might start to kind of get very focused, you know, but in a not so good way, kind of like having to fix something. And so for me, those are all signals, which Mandel speaks about, is we have these signals, these tells, and being able to listen to them and use them. And I think the fulcrum point is to be able to use them in a way that's not about this is how it is, but being able to offer to the client what is being noticed and asking them what they make of it. Even if it's about our own body. So, you know, I might say to a client, look, I might be completely off. But what I'm noticing as you're talking about how you want to be in this relationship is my breathing's tightening up. And it might sound completely strange, but, you know, does that make any sense to you? So paying attention to the signal and then using it, but in a way where the client has permission to decide where to go with it.
I like that. I might also, what was coming up for me when Karen was speaking is I work with a lot of coaches in training, and we always land up having to talk about what do you need to unlearn in order to be a coach, and that we don't have a Harry Potter cloak that we put on when we're coaching, that we have to practice to be a coach before we're a coach. We have to practice how we ask questions. We have to start to look at the ways in which we show up, or the way in which we ask questions. We have to do that in the field before we come into the coaching room. And if I think about myself, because, you know, that courageous conversation is the one where we're going to say something that is traditionally uncomfortable, or we don't say it out there, but here we do. So in my corporate days, I was always known for giving feedback. However, I gave feedback with 2 AK-47s. I mean, yes, I can tell it like it is, but there's debris and blood on the carpet by the time I'm finished. And so that's one side of it. The other side of it is that those people who give feedback, and it's like wrapped between 2 Oreo cookies, so you can hardly find what it is. And so I think that it's building the skill for compassionate dislodgement.
Compassionate dislodgement.
Yes. So you're not blood and guts on the carpet, and you're not looking for where's this hidden in the Oreo cookie. You might be curious about what you've been told.
Something that's coming up for me again, and it's reflected in the comments actually about what you were saying about building the capacity for discomfort, is this tendency that I used to have, and I think this is a sign of me finally evolving a bit in my coaching, which is when clients are stuck. I used to have this, okay, reframe, how can we move them forward? what needs to happen here? Let's look at different perspectives. Let's go up, down, big, small, shift them forward in time. And I think that tendency to soothe, actually, to rescue. And I think that's not our role as coaches again. And I think our role as coaches might be to help them explore that discomfort and what it's telling them. Explore the hole they feel stuck in. Tap into what intelligence there is within that stuckness itself. The capacity for discomfort. And not soothe. And not there. It's all okay. We can move on. We can create a goal. We can look at different options. But actually, okay, what's that telling you? That not knowing.
And I think with that, Mary Anna, what you're pointing to is something, and I think Sharon, you've done it as well. That's really important, is our capacity to be in capitals with our clients. Which I think when we're able to do that is to acknowledge what's going on for them and not have to rescue. And there are 3 words that come up for me, and that is love. So, and love in the sense of being able to witness and be there for our clients. Care, so we care for and care with them. And legitimacy. And for me, legitimacy is about trusting that they are resourceful and whole and have the capacity within them. And I think if those 3 are present, it creates, I mean, I talk about creating a container for our clients to be able to explore, to go to places where they didn't think it was possible for them to go.
Nice.
May I ask, Karen, how do you do that? This is into how do you create that container?
It's in a way, it's about, I think that's where what's going on in my body. So paying attention, arriving intentionally, having practices that I engage in, and the 2 of you know about, the leadership embodiment work that I'm engaged in. So I think it's about doing our inner work so that when we arrive in a particular way, and we create an environment where clients recognize that all of them is welcome. And so for me, that's a way of being thing. And then being able to notice what's happening for our clients and inquire into their relationship to their way of being or what they're bringing.
Yeah, so I want to have a question for you, Karen, because of your huge amount of experience in working with the body. I've been thinking about, when in our non-verbal years, where probably such huge learning takes place, children are completely connected to what their body is telling them, and how some will see the challenge as exciting and others will see it as terrifying. So the body might be doing the same thing, but the brain signal is completely different. I'm curious about that because I think we take that with us as adults. So you might love a roller coaster, and I would be saying, not on your life. I have no courage for that. But I might see something else as, yes, that's something I want to do, and I have to call on my courage to do that. So, yeah, can you talk about that?
Can you just help me, Sharon, in terms of the question, so I can respond?
The question is, would you agree that there is a body signal for when courage is needed, and that for different people, it will be evoked in a different way.
Yes, and I think that in each instance as well, it might be different. So, for example, the roller coaster ride, there may be a particular body signal, and sitting in silence, there may be another body signal. And so, in a way, I think the first port of call is about developing awareness and understanding of our own nervous system. And in a way, a nice way of, I think, framing it is, what are our preferences? It's almost what settles our nervous system, and what are our prejudices? So what kind of gets us up? And neither one is good or bad, by the way, because I think that can be again, we can get caught. And this is, if we link it back to, as children, we're completely embodied. We move our body spontaneously, fluidly. And then we go to school, and two things I think happen. The one is that we're told to keep our body still. That's the one thing. And then the other thing is that we're told we have to know. In very subtle ways, it's like, you've got to know the answer. If you know the answer, that's amazing. You're such a bright little girl, bright little boy. And so our socialization becomes about that. And in a way, as coaches, I think we're breaking that cultural trance. And so I don't know if I'm responding to your question directly. I think it's about understanding and having awareness of our body and learning to listen to those signals. And I think the biggest thing around courageous coaching is slowing everything down, because that's also part of our cultural trance, is we've got to achieve, we've got to get somewhere. Yeah, so let me
get the goal, add value.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to stop now, Mary Anna, and see what's happening out there.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of our time, because we'd said half an hour, and right at the end of our half an hour. So we've got some comments about your speaking about how courageous it is to be with in silence rather than soothe and comfort. I'm wondering whether we should have some closing comments about what all this means for us, and how we need to turn up as coaches, what we can do to build our capacity for courageousness, to wrap up, and then if need be, we can continue the conversation in the group. And I will, yeah. I think for me, it's a very recent thing about tuning into my body. And I'm saying recent, it's reminding me actually of, I've got a whole PhD based on rave culture, and it's really looking at the ecstatic experience of when people, and it was when people were in a room together dancing, that kind of intuitive connection that people shared with one another, and how it changed a section of society. And then, grew up, jobs, family, whatever, different distractions. And it's actually very recently that I'm tapping into that feeling of sinking into my body and connecting. And it's all about presence for me. It's about where I put my attention, which is on the connection, and not what my head is saying about the next question I need to ask, or the goal they need to get, or the coaching program or the organization within which they are. It's actually about just putting my attention into the connection through our presence. I have some physical tricks that I do to enable me to do that, which is to really look at how I'm sitting. And I'm new to this stuff, I'm completely out of tune with my own body. So I have to actually physically sit in a certain way and make a conscious effort to tap into my kind of power center right down here and be present. And for some reason, by just tuning out all the chat up here and putting my energy and attention down here and with, into my client, I can be more courageous. So that's my takeaway for people, that just whatever works for you, but it may need work and be an ongoing process for you. Mine certainly is. I have to consciously adopt a courageous position within my coaching.
I think I've pretty much spoken to that, so I'll be brief. There are, I think there's a very quick window in, and that is by paying attention to our breathing. So that's key. So I agree with you, the body, and I've spoken quite a bit about the body. The leadership embodiment centering practice I find to be profound as a way of just bringing me into the present in a very particular kind of way. So having practices that are embodied in a nutshell. And by the way, just before I hand over to Sharon, Mary Anna, I did not know that was what your PhD was about. And I'm very keen to have a conversation about that separately. And over to you, Sharon.
Yes, I think my closing really is the one thing that has worked for me is to remember that the word courage comes from the French word for heart. And if we can always make sure that our heart is aligned with our courage, then we are serving our clients, ourselves, our families in the best possible way we can.
Thank you for that. And thank you for joining me today, and to people's for their comments and feedback. And let's continue the conversation now over in the Facebook group. It may not happen for me immediately, but I will be in there and responding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks
Sharon.
everyone.
Thanks, Mary Anna.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks to everyone who's online.